Welcome to the Chapter 9 video. Alright, I really don't get a whole lot of questions about Chapter 9, so I thought I'd throw in a few thoughts that help you figure out what you need to know hopefully more quickly. The main thing about this one is this is the most calculator-driven chapter we do. As for why that is, in 9. We see this top gray box. In 9.1, there's a lot of questions that run off of this calculation right here. You see that big mess, little r equals? All those sigmas, that thing is an enormous mess. Probably the messiest formula you've ever tried to do. If you want to do it by hand, you are of course welcome, but your calculator will do it. Let's look over here and I'll explain what it's doing. Little r here equals is a fraction, and the numerator adds up. It's all the differences in the numerical values of the data caused by a linear relationship between the x's and the y's. And the denominator is all the differences in numerical values caused by everything. All right. What this means is that when this ratio is close to 1 or minus 1, it means that most of the differences in the numerical values are caused by a linear relationship between x and y. When this ratio is close to 0, it means that a linear relationship between x and y has little, if anything, to do with the differences. So, in other words, this r is a ratio. When it's close to 1 or minus 1, it means that correlation is significant. A linear correlation is significant. All right. When it's not, then it means it's not. And what counts as close enough to be meaningful depends on the sample size, and you'll learn how to work with that as you work through the chapter. Now, in 9.2 we have this box. I'm going to calculate a linear correlation line, right? A regression line. And you see there's the equation for the m, there's the equation for the b. By the way, your calculator will call this a and b instead of m and b. Anyway, you can see that's still an enormous mess again. Once you got the m or the a, b's pretty easy, but anyway, again, your calculator will do it. Okay? So, let's talk about a little bit about how to use the calculator. If you've got a TI-83 or 84, hit second, and then catalog. This is the second function on the 0 key. Use the down arrow, and you have to go down quite a ways until you can see and select diagnostic on. So you'll have a little caret on mine. On the newer ones, it might highlight them as you go. One of the way, you scroll all the way down to diagnostic on. You got to scroll down like 100 entries or something. They're in alphabetical order, so you can get there. Once the diagnostic on is either highlighted or has a caret next to it, hit enter to select it, hit enter again to activate it. Once you've done that, diagnostic is on, and you shouldn't have to do that again. Okay? That is, it'll stay on unless you remove the batteries and the backup battery, or you reset the calculator to the factory defaults. You can turn it off for the night or whatever, it'll still stay on. Now, once you've got that on, you can do the following. Select the stat button and then enter to go to the area where you can enter the data values. Enter x values into L1, y values into L2. If you've not worked with this before, right? If you've not worked with this data entry area before, all right, hopefully you worked with it in one of our earlier chapters, but I know some folks weren't using the videos early on. But if you've not worked with the data entry screens before, I strongly recommend that you find the second video in the video links file, which is behind the Prof's outlines and videos in Blackboard, and watch that video. All right, it's just about 6 minutes long. It'll run you through how to use this whole data entry area. Okay. Once all the data is entered, then you hit stat again, and then right arrow. When you hit right arrow, this will select calc from the stat menu. Type the number 4. This will select option 4, which is linreg, which is short for linear regression, and then enter. Now, if you have one of the newer TI-84s, it may ask you some questions when you select option 4. I'm not sure exactly what it does. I don't have one of the newer ones. You may need to tell it that the x values are in L1 and the y values are in L2. The older models will just assume this is true, though. On the next screen, so after you've hit 4 and then enter, or worked your way through the equivalent on one of the newer ones, the next screen that comes up, the a and a b are the two coefficients that you need for linear regression in section 9.2, right? These up here, the a is the m and the b is the b. All right? So, The A and the B are the two coefficients that you need for linear regression in section 9.2, and R is the correlation coefficient. All right. Now, be sure to pick up from the book or the videos where you can use the regression line to predict a Y value and where the regression line can't help you. It's not complicated, but I'm just giving you a heads up that there's some places it doesn't work. Now, another little note here. Doing a hypothesis test for a population correlation coefficient is really not exactly simple, but I rarely get questions about it, so I'm going to leave that for everyone to figure out from the video or the book, or, as always, if you're having any trouble with it, let me know. I'll be glad to help. Okay, this hypothesis test is a formal way of determining whether or not the correlation is meaningful. All right, pretty much any real data situation, R is not going to be 0. Okay? In theory it could be, in practice it doesn't work out like that. So whenever you get an R value, the question is that big enough to be meaningful or not? And what's big enough depends on the sample size, okay? So, you perform a hypothesis test with the formal way of determining whether or not the correlation is meaningful. This process gives the same answer as the informal and much quicker method, as long as the numbers involved are in the table that you use for the informal method. In other words, people normally use the informal method unless they're doing like a formal write-up for a boss or a presentation, or if they're in the situation where the numbers involved are not in the table, then you have no choice but to do the hypothesis test. All right, so that is it for Chapter 9. I hope you find that helpful, and we'll move on to Chapter 10. We're almost done.